So wonderful, thank you, and good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. This is another part of the Salon series around scaffolding, dialectical thinking, scaffolding, cognitive development. We have started with a special salon with John Stewart, another salon with Otto Lasker, then another salon with John and Otto in dialogue, and now this is the fourth salon where the idea is that Bernhard, I will share my small feeble attempts around using GPT to have some kind of sparring with a user, and whether this could be helpful to kind of support cognitive development and widening of thought. And I would like to share with you my experiences and my hypothesis that I'm having at the moment. And so for me, this has been interesting months now. So I started experimenting with it in July, and from there on, I've had quite a ride. Not only in the way how to what could be the use of a language model, but also technically, what is it that can be done with these models within my personal capabilities, of course, and also my assumptions, how I would like to have it. I call the definitions, hypothesis, and experiences. First question always is, when we use the term mind opening, what are we referring to? Thank you, Nick, for supporting me and pointing me to omissions and mistakes I made in the first draft of the presentation. So what we could argue is that that a definition of mind opening is helpful if we say it's something that is triggered from outside. There is some kind of support there, and then happens something in the mind of the user. So this idea of there's an exterior impulse and then ensuing interior dialogue. At least that's the definition that I'm using here. And I'm interested, of course, to hear if you would see it differently later. And I'm grateful also for for separating two different things. So maybe deepening, the second one, would be something where some kind of stage transition happens or is beginning to happen, but maybe there is also something like a widening, and I'm using the metaphor of a floor with a house with many floors, and let's assume that you have one floor, and maybe you have not been visiting some of the rooms lately, but with some helpful questions you come into these different rooms in your floor, and so this could also be some kind of widening. And I'm saying this because my assumption is that what I've been experiencing, and also others, that widening definitely happens. I'm not yet really sure if deepening happens, but I would assume for the moment that widening definitely happens. So this is my first assumption. I'm also we're all familiar with these collections of questions. So at least my first encounter with the different thought form descriptions was in Otto's book and the appendix, right? So and I was very delighted to see them, and I was hearing this again and again from other people. I think, John, you also referred to this experience of finding these descriptions of these thought forms. And for me and for others, I think it was helpful to connect these abstract patterns with our own challenges. And we could also translate these abstract patterns with challenges coachees might be having. But at least I made the experiences, and I think you also, that even if people find these descriptions and these questions in their mother tongue, even then, it's not easy for everybody to connect these questions with their own challenges. So my assumption is that we need some kind of translation or many people need some kind of translation of a generic question, generic pattern with their own challenge. And so I'm using these language models as what they are, as a language model. So I'm not trying to get good answers from them, but I'm trying to say, so this is the generic pattern. So this is the problem of the user. Can you please connect this generic pattern with this topic? And this is what they're doing quite well, what I've seen, and I will show a few examples later. So this is something that a language model can do. The relevant question for me is not so much if these translations of questions patterns into the topic of the user, if this is done better by a GPT in comparison to a good coach. So this is not my thing. My question is, are these translations better than abstract cards or abstract lists of questions that we might read somewhere else? And here at the moment, I'm really sure that this is better. But of course, I'm not saying that these are good coaches or something. So thank you for the dialogues I was having with you at the beginning of September. That helped me a lot to also to see which pictures I was having and you and others were having around the question of coaching. So the funny thing is, and I think we are all aware by now, that language models do not understand really. So the metaphor, I think we all, you heard it before, that it's kind of a probability guess. What's the next most probable word? I think that's a bit simplified, but probably, but the thing really is apparently large language models don't really seem to understand, to grasp anything. So they are mimicking behavior. Yes. So, and thank you, Nick, for referring to the aspect that even if language models are not dialectical in themselves, our relationship to this model can be. So I think that's a helpful distinction. Is there a market niche? I think there is. I think there is a market niche for those people who either do not have the money to have somebody spar with them, or who do not find it easy to find a good person, at least in their time of the day, to have some kind of dialoguing sparring. There is another niche for me, at least, that I'm seeing, that I hope that my coachees of the future will come with a warmed up, kind of widened mind before they come into coaching with me. So this is also a hope that I'm having. I'm not sure if this will realize, of course. When I started out, at least I was, and I think I've heard other people as well, they were thinking, so now we will use this for scoring. So scoring text and have more or less a GPT or some similar model do these scoring dialogues and then score the text, etc., etc. I assume this is possible. I'm assuming it, but in the end, I don't care. So this is not my question. My question is not if they can score well, and this would really need a lot of training. But what I am sure, and what I've seen before again and again, is that they can make good enough assumptions about the user's mind and adjust their communication. So if I'm speaking from a rather simple perspective, GPT can adjust, even if the background is the same for a person on a relatively logical or even pre-logical level, and for another person. So GPT can adjust, and if we tell him to adjust well and use, for example, a model of hierarchical complexity as something that GPT is aware of. So GPT can make quite good assumptions around this model. And I've heard all the skepticism around the model. But the thing is, this is something that GPT knows. And so this is a rough thing that we can help to to support GPT adjust to the level of communication. And we've also seen, so this is something that I'm doing here, make assumptions around the model for complexity, cognitively, Keegan stage, MBTI, Clifton strength, and adjust your communication. So this is what the script can do quite well. There is another thing about trust, I think. So I think, and I've experienced, if people are kind of skeptical towards AI and large language models, of course, they're quite hesitant. So they will keep more distance. And of course, this will not work. So even more than if we, for example, say, if people cannot be sure, where does my text land? Will Bernhard or somebody else see my personal data? Will Bernhard see the scorings that GPT is doing about me, et cetera, et cetera? So there can be no trust, I think. So this is, I think, a vital question. And so I'm also, within my own capabilities, trying to avoid any of these things, of course. And of course, the moment we are doing some kind of personality hypothesis, even if Bernhard does not know about them, if GPT does them, GPT needs to make them transparent. So this is part of the script that I'm doing, that the model not just adjusts the communication to these hypotheses, but it also shares them later if the user wants. So the first things that I built, this is just in case you're interested. So there are 7, I used GPT-3 first and 3.5 and 4 now, and Claude and Bard and Hugging Face and even other models. Now I'm working with my GPT. You may have heard that. So it's possible with a Pro account, with a GPT-4 account, that you kind of build your own GPT and upload special materials so that you can have your own special agent or supportive AI here. And in one attempt, I really built 7 strict modules with a clear sequence. So in case you're interested, you would find them on the website, mindopening.net, and there you can really download all these scripts. So I tried to kind of harness the GPT model and say, you're very creative, you're a wonderful language model, but you have to follow the script step by step, which is kind of against the nature of GPT. GPT is a very freedom-loving creature. So he jumps all kinds of ways around. And so I was really harnessing and putting a strict girdle around its neck. These are the different modules here. So I said at the beginning, so I gave GPT different roles, and then I said, who are you? Why do you want to talk to me? Why is this important? What would happen if you would not be able to achieve this goal? Then GPT itself comes up with a driving question and says, did I get you right? Is what you're saying, how might I, so that. So this is the sentence structure. And then the user can say, yes, I think you got me right or not. So I, most of the time, had the impression it was getting my things right. So, and then I let GPT offer this driving question because I made the experience that the user, it's himself or themselves, they're kind of in the flow of expressing, but coming up with this concise driving question is very often not so easy for users. So therefore, I'm kind of let GPT do this sentence structuring around the driving question. And then there are only 3 questions. What do you know already? What are you still unsure about your driving question? And what do you plan already? So not to start and jump into the dialogue before having really clarified what is maybe already clear. Then in blue, you see the hypothesis of the personality. So the first hypothesis, not to be shared, but so that in module 3 already the communication can be adjusted, nuanced around this rough hypothesis. So here the communication is adjusted. I will come into this a bit later. And then again, after this is the core, and now in module 4, again, the same hypothesis. And then in module 5, the sharing of these hypotheses and recommendations for the driving question and for personality development. So for example, in MBTI, I inserted a recommendation about what might be missing because of your MBTI profile. So I don't know, for me, for example, INTJ probably, so about all the things where it's about my feeling and about sensory and about extrovert, about perceiving, which are all my blind spots potentially. And if GPT had the impression there was something missing, it would highlight this here. And then in module 6, it would be the closing down and summarizing and insights, etc. So that it's kind of a harvesting of the whole communication. The core modules are here, and the core modules are around, here you see from 3 to 7. I put together 12 thought form patterns for each of these stages. And in 7, I took Eva's patterns for meta-systematic, and for concrete to systematic, I put myself things together. The other ones, so the 4th in the module 1 is either the 4 dialectical moments, Lasker, or the 28 thought forms. And then 2 is a transformational canvas, I call it, which is about kind of, okay, coming to the next step, and what is the DNA, and what do you put it in the museum. So it's a kind of simplified but dialectical transformational model. And the module 8, script 8 is something else altogether, something that Nathan somehow suggested and I picked up. So it's the question of what would a coach ask you and how would you yourself answer these questions? So it's kind of jumping into the role as a coach and jumping back into the role as a user. So that's a different approach here. And here at the beginning, you see it's either following a script, and now today actually I put together modules that are more free. And when I say more free, I mean it's only the first things are fixed. So only module 1, so what this is quite clear. But then in module 3, where it's about the core, GPT does not need to follow question 1, question 2, question 3, but I'm uploaded patterns and I'm saying, pick a pattern that you think is now the best and appropriate for what the user has been sharing. And I was thinking, well, I was not sure what would happen. So would he maybe just go from 1 to 10 or something? And I was really surprised how well it fit. So I did it within one of the 12 patterns. I did it with all from concrete to meta-systematic. So these are 60 patterns. And I did it with the 28 thought forms. And I was really surprised. And it could really say, this is the pattern. And now this is my question, which is really relating the pattern to your topic. So we can go into this if you're interested then. So these are some things that you would find on the website. So it's kind of a disclaimer and say, this is not robust yet. I'm not sure if you have seen people use, especially those who have been using GPT-4 for longer, they kind of try to trick the system again and again so that the system is, so maybe you have seen these robots where the scientists are kind of kicking the robot and seeing whether the robot falls on the side, just to make sure if he is resilient. And it's the same with these scripts. So these scripts are not resilient at the moment. So they're quite fragile. So the users really should behave and follow the sequences and follow the questions. This would be one example, for example. So who are you, etc. What is your question? What would happen if not? And then GPT comes up with a driving question. So this is just to show how GPT is kind of using the material to come up with a driving question. And then, for example, this would be one small pattern that I put into concrete. The question who is one of these patterns. This is the material that I'm offering. And then I say, ask 3 questions addressing the driving question of the user, picking up the pattern, integrating the material the user has shared so far. And this is, for example, what they did then. So this was my driving question around some kind of two hospital organizations building a new hospital together. This is my challenge. And so these are questions that the GPT came up here. And I found this quite interesting and helpful, actually, to kind of spar with myself. And I think this could be a good example that it's, as far as, for me at least, it would not be a deepening, I think, but it would be a widening. So I'm kind of exploring my floor. But this already is helpful for me if I don't have a partner together here in this project to kind of go into blind spots I might be having here. There is another thing around another thing that I'm want to share. So this would be my driving question: how can I make these scripts available? And the prompt would be pick, if you think of the 4 moments, make a moderate complex question addressing the dialectical moment of context. So in this script, you say, I'm saying, we have these 4 moments, and for each moment, you should ask a moderate question, a medium complex question, and a quite really complex question. So, and this would be the simplest version of context. And of course, we could argue now, is this really context? But actually, I don't care a lot if this is very clean, but I found it again widening so that I do not have to translate it myself into my material, but rather it helped me to kind of see different perspectives. Yeah, I said before, now I used a more free technical approach, uploading files. And I found it at the moment quite interesting that it could do it quite well. At the moment, you've seen I only focused on so-called cognitive things. And these are some topics that I want to continue to develop. So polarities, building on material from the Russians, Varexa, but also polarity management, value squares, Schultz von Thun, Krugreuther, Sharma wrote something about polarities, and probably there's much more, but this already helped me to kind of see different aspects. James Fowler, spiritual, etc. Was this helpful? So a person who used this answered, and so the person said this was quite interesting and helpful, actually. The thought forms have become more tangible, it's more meat. Also, the hypotheses were interesting. And here at the beginning, you see that was a little wow moment. So this kind of seeing the context. Again, the person is well aware and is well capable to see context, of course, from her cognitive stage, but this was widening. So in this, it was kind of reminding the person that contexts are important, of course. Recommendations. If you have been playing around with GPT, you will realize that within 3 hours, you have only 40 prompts. So if you're playing around with at least 2 scripts, you can easily run into these 40 prompts, and sometimes even with 1. So this is one of the difficult things. And it can take quite a while. So sometimes if you're really into it, it could take you more than 1 hour to finish 1 script. And so maybe I should and could come up with shorter versions of this here. Also, the imagining the coach approach, the person said it felt strange. Actually, the funny thing was, and the person was sharing the scripts with me, the dialogues that she was having. And when I read them, I found especially this dialogue quite interesting. But for the person themselves, it was not so satisfying. And then would the person use it again? And the person said, well, for the upcoming master thesis, maybe she would use this, but probably not for writing better text, but rather, and so making it easier, but rather to spar and to widen the thinking. Here on this website, of course, I'm sharing everything, so it's possible to use them. There is, and there's also one of the strong assumption I'm having. At the beginning, we were thinking about programming something, and this would have meant that people would kind of log into a platform and would pay some kind of fee, and the cost for GPT would be covered by me, because my GPT account would be used and my API codes would be used, of course, and the person would then pay a fee. And I'm trying to avoid that kind of at any cost. So I'm trying to say, please use your own GPT so that I'm not part of this game. So it's not running via me, but it's kind of democratically available as much as possible. And we could do this also with GPT 3.5, so with the free version. It's just that the quality of this version, for me at least at the moment, is not good enough that I would trust that the sparring is good enough. So therefore, I think it's important that people use their GPT-4, and at least for 1 month or a bit longer, they have a monthly fee of €20. And I think at the moment it's worth the money. But of course, this is the kind of barrier or the hurdle we are having. Thank you for the support, everybody of you. So for me, I would not have been able to do this by myself. So as much I was doing all kinds of testing and things by myself and experimenting, for me, this was really important to have this back and forth and the feedback from each of you. Thank you so much. So jumping back to my role as a facilitator, John, do you want to start?
Yeah, just a brief comment first on AI and what it's capable of at the moment and where it might head. Yeah, I agree completely with you when you point out that the large language models aren't dialectical thinkers. They're not at that cognitive level. And I think it's worth sort of imagining, because there's a lot of hype about AI, it's worth imagining, will that change anytime soon? There's lots of hype about the quick emergence of human level general intelligence and then escalating to super intelligence through a singularity kind of process. I would make the point that it will be as hard and difficult to scaffold metasystemic thinking in AI of general intelligence than it is to do it for humans. And a similar kind of process would need to be involved and so on. And in fact, to get AI to human level intelligence itself will probably mean that the AI would have to go through interactive social processes like human babies do when they develop, go to childcare, go to kindy, go to school, have mini breakdowns when they're teenagers and so on, have to deal with the trauma that they've inherited from their childhood, which we all do, and that because they're all essential components of building building to the higher levels. And I'd further add, and I don't want to get bogged down in this, but it could well be possible that the only way to create higher intelligence or even human intelligence in AI is to have a simulation which simulates a universe in which life emerges, and then that life develops, and then it produces intelligent organisms, and then they go through the levels and so on. It's because of a thing called computational irreducibility. It is highly likely, I think, that you can't short circuit that process. So coming now to the specifics, I see great value in what you've done already, Bernhard, because as I think I've said before, the world has an enormous need now, or the human world has an enormous need to spread dialectical thinking, metasystemic thinking. That thinking is essential to deal with the complex existential threats that currently threaten humanity. A major barrier to the spread of metasystemic thinking is the fact that when people are at a particular level, like the analytical rational level or formal operations, whatever you want to call it, when they're at that level, they don't see a need to change. They don't see the limitations of their thinking. They don't see any space, to use your term, this widening. They don't see the widening space that their thinking isn't going to. And using sort of, the dialectical model of Hegel and Marx and so on, it's not until they hit contradictions it's where their current level of thinking fails. And it's a hell of a surprise to them when it does. But that's the beginning, perhaps, of creating the conditions for which they'll go to a higher level. So what I see as the enormous benefit of the digital sparring partner is that they can produce those contradictions. They can, through the questioning, they can demonstrate to the individual that their current thinking, which the individual thinks can answer all problems that can be answered, the individual who thinks that needs to be provided with an experience, which the DSP can, that shows them that their existing thinking is flawed, limited, and so on. And that can provide the motive for developing it further. So, I see the DSP that you've outlined here can act as a funnel. Hopefully, yes, it could be an automated process by which individuals can encounter it, and that will then create the conditions. Their encounter with the DSP will hopefully create the conditions that will unseat their analytical rational cognition and begin to motivate them to go further. I'd add to that then that, however, the DSP, as you pointed out, is limited in what it can do. So it can, in my view, it can perform this extremely valuable function of guiding individuals to experience the limitations of their current thinking and point to a promised land, of so on. It can do that, but what it doesn't do, it probably, to some extent it would, but it probably isn't a great way of permanently widening the person's thinking, in the sense that in relation to their driving question, it definitely widens their thinking, and they will come out of it thinking, oh my God, there's, how did I miss these things? Why did I miss these things? And they'll be told, hopefully in the context in which they've entered this, that it's because of their lack of thinking. There are ways of, overcoming those lacks, those deficiencies. But they won't come out of it with a set of developing mental skills that enable them to do that widening for themselves, for different driving questions. That would require a different process. So broadly, how I see that, because I think something Otto and I agreed on furiously was that the goal is to produce an individual who is a self-scaffolder. And what that means in this context, I think, one way of sort of metaphorically identifying what self-scaffolding entails and what needs to be installed in an individual to enable them to be a self-scaffolder. One way of seeing this, using the DSP as a, somewhat metaphorically, the task is to install within the individual the DSP function. So you have an internal digital sparring partner. Another way of saying it is you have an internal thought processes and capabilities that enable you to see the deficiencies in your analytical rational thinking, to ask yourself mind-opening questions that widen your thinking. Then the deepening process occurs through making visible what was not visible before, making your own thinking visible, because you can't do what the DSP does without seeing your own thinking as object to a certain extent. So yeah, that's my comments. I'm obviously happy to have a disagreement about that or whatever and discuss it further.
Thank you. So if it's okay, I would respond to a few things, and then I'm happy to hear other aspects as well. So for me, at the beginning, as I said, one I think avenue I decided not to go further is the avenue of scoring. But there's another avenue I first thought it would be interesting, but then quickly realized I don't want to go there. It's the question of training a language model to become dialectical. So this is also not in my interest. So it's more kind of playing tennis against the wall. So how can I design a better wall, but not to have the wall play tennis really, but to play against the wall. I think I would say that. The other thing is that I'm trying to script GPT, that GPT makes transparent what he's doing. So now I'm using this pattern so that the person somehow remembers, this is the pattern. So it provides small offers to kind of come back to these patterns, and also to download the questions, or et cetera, et cetera. So this is what I want to stress a bit more in the future. What I found very interesting is what you said pretty much at the beginning, the question of contradiction. So out of contradiction happens something, and what I realized is that I was producing or programming a friendly, not contradicting DSP. So he would never contradict. He would always say, how wonderful what you just said. This is so, eye-opening or whatever, all kinds of wonderful things he would say to you, and then he would continue with the next question. So he would not challenge really. And so this, and GPT is itself a yes man. So it's very much agreeing. If you go to Claude, for example, it's a bit more challenging. But of course, this is something that can be tuned. So this was very helpful for me to see how would a script look like that would not just ask questions in a friendly, polite manner, but then also kind of, as you're using a small hammer, and to kind of see, is this solid? Is there something else, or what's behind this? So this was very interesting for me. Yes, thank you. Playing around with these questions of how to adjust, how to script the adjustment. And the formula I took is threefold probably. So first I said, adjust to the level of the user. Then I said, challenge the user. Third, but stay within the zone of proximal development. And I said, take on as a mimic metasystemic cognitive level. And so this is the mixture, the combination at the moment I found quite helpful. But again, of course, it could be that things only work because I'm doing it myself. And I may have shared the example about Hans the horse again and again, but it still is so helpful for me to, and you may be aware of this magical horse that could count. But of course it couldn't count. It was just very sensitive for the movements of the owner. And the owner was kind of nodding, and then Hans knew how to count. But then they put out the owner, and it could still count because another person made a nodding without realizing that it nodded. So it was just wonderfully sensitive. And it could well be that my GPTs that I'm programming here are so well fitting to me as a person and my needs and my profile and my INTJ material, my INTJ profile of MBTI, that it might well not function at all with people who have a very different profile. So the person who did the second most testing also has an INTJ profile. So we will see if it really works with other people, but this at least is where I am at the moment. But as you say, Ryan, question of how to adjust this is really challenging, and also how not to not to exaggerate the challenging so that the user finds it too far away.
ChatGPT, let's call it the digital sparring partner, the DSP, could be tweaked so it was honed in more on identifying limitations in the thinking of the person who is using it, and it could even, if the function of this is to funnel people towards coaching and further experiences that help develop metasystemic thinking, then the actual DSP could overtly point them in that direction. So in other words, it seems to me, Bernhard, and particularly I listened carefully to what you said about the fact that your current model, your current DSP, can disclose to the person using it what the patterns it is that it's using in order to come up with mind-opening questions, in order to identify how the thinking of the person is narrow and can be widened. Given that it can do that, it's then a short step from there to use that information to put to the person who's using the DSP to say that there is a body of knowledge and a system for identifying one, where their deficiencies are in their current thinking, and two, how the widening of their thinking and deepening of their thinking can be scaffolded. So, I hate to say this, and I'm just sort of thinking through listening to the discussion, but the DSP could be tweaked more overtly to be an actual seller of coaching and, a seller of tools that are available to further develop them that go beyond what the DSP can. There has to be a commercial aspect of this, because it's our economy that makes certain contributions to society. It makes them profitable, and that the fact that they're profitable means that more and more people and resources are attracted to those areas and so on. And that's what we need for, in my view, for the development of dialectical thinking. There has to be a quid in providing these coaching services and so on. but in the beginning, yeah, a DSP that provides an experience that convinces people that their thinking is limited and that there are ways of developing it further. That's an enormous first step towards, you know, spreading it significantly.
I see more something like Linux. So a platform that's open and people collaborate and bring together at the same time, at least as far as I know, the Linus Torvald can be quite an authoritarian person to decide what to integrate and what not. At the same time, it's a participatory movement. So I would also hope that people come up with new suggestions, etc. And of course, I would take the liberty in my version to decide what to integrate and what not to integrate, while other people can make their different versions, of course. So there's the freedom.
Yeah, sure.
And what I'm seeing also, and enriched now by your inspirations, maybe there can be a platform where these scripts are available, and there is some kind of forum where people suggest improvements, etc. And there also is then a page where it says, okay, so these are, I don't know, 5, 10 coaches, and they can pick that they can kind of continue where you left.
Yeah.
So they could do more. Yeah. So, and maybe we would also bring in the metaphor of widening and deepening there. So maybe GPT was helpful for widening things, but now if you want, there are coaches who could help you deepen. If it's okay, I just share. So here is just Google. Then if you go to mindopening.net, and there, these are the things. And here, for example, various dialectical DSPs. And here, this is the latest version that I was putting together, the freer ones. And this would then start. I'm logged in as a user here. And then you would need to click on this first prompt, just like this. And hopefully it says, who are you? Why do you want to talk to me? So it needs sometimes a few seconds. So, and is it okay to take a few minutes to play with it?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Bernhard. I'm thinking about how to establish a platform for dialectical coaching with my DSPs as a way to widen the thinking of users, and then referring to dialectical coaches who can support the user to deepen their thinking. So it doesn't, you don't necessarily have to insert that much. You can also just say, I want to say, I'm thinking about a platform for dialectical coaching, for example. So you don't need to be as specific as I was here. Then hopefully it asks me, why is this important for you? So, and so here he's already created. What drives you? This is not in my prompt. So he comes up with this himself. I see this. I see a lot of potential for scaffolding, dialectical thinking, and many people that could who would not have access elsewhere to these opportunities. Okay. And he should ask me what would happen if you won't achieve this goal. Nothing really. hopefully somebody else picks up or comes up with something like this at the same time. I'm here, for example, there is no damage being done if I would not achieve this goal. But sometimes when people come up with their challenge, then and they won't make it, then there are really bad consequences. So this is I think this question is helpful to come up with a driving question. So and now he should come up with a driving question and say, so and suggest one. So how might you so that, and in this so that if there is a bad thing that could happen, it would integrate this and say so that you don't do this or that. So sometimes I'm sometimes not sure why. So sometimes it's because a lot of people are in the model probably, and sometimes I have the impression that he's just thinking hard. At the moment, I'm afraid there are so many people there. Okay. How might I establish a platform for dialectical thinking with DSPs to widen and deepen the thinking of users so that more people can access opportunities, potentially influencing positive personal and societal change? I didn't even say that, I think, right? Does this question resonate with you? That's good.
Was definitely widening, Bernhard.
Yes, thank you. So, and now the real, now it should me ask, what do I know already, what I'm still unsure about, and what do I plan already? So this is still not very dialectical, but just to be clear, what am I already building upon? I know that DSPs do some good work around widening. What do I still know? I know some good dialectical coaches who I might approach to be represented on the platform. Okay. What are you still unsure about should be the next question. I'm not sure how to make the many DSPs accessible, understandable. Why should a user pick this one or another one? So this is one of the questions I was still unsure about. At the moment, there are, I think, 15 or 12, and this is impossible for a user to pick. So how to guide the user to pick one? Which plans do you have? Or are you planning one ready? So integrating the feedback and recommendations of my colleagues, and then playing around with the conception of a platform, then sharing these ideas again. So this would be the end of the introduction. And now starts the dialectical thing, hopefully. And now he says, okay, this is process 4. And he says, is there a pattern to the interaction between the feedback from your colleagues and your own conception of the platform? How do these two elements influence each other? So this I find quite interesting, for example. So it fits, I think, to what has been shared before. And he picked this one out of 28. And so this would continue like this. And at the end, it will ask me, so I could jump to another window now. Yeah. So this is the script that that is behind. So I'm saying mimic cognitive level metasystematic, only ask one question at a time. So these are the first things. Who are you? Why do you want to talk to me? Etc. Etc. Driving question. And this is what do you know already? Still unsure planning. And now comes the core, and it says find the uploaded file, an overview of the cognitive patterns, use these patterns to challenge the user, ask people in questions, share in brackets the cognitive pattern, code plus title, to enable transparency and meta learning, adjust the complexity to the level of the user, challenging but within the zone of proximal development. And after 5 questions, ask a user if they want to continue or if they want to go to a close. And when they want to go to a close, then it says, share the latest version of the driving question, develop an updated version and ask them if they want to update their driving question. Share what you think were the most important insights for the user. Share how you would answer the question of the user now, of course, building upon the things the user said. Ask what the user is still unsure about, and ask what the user has thought about doing in the future during the conversation. So as a share, share. So the GPT would share the different commitments that the user already made. It would summarize them. And then it would go to a meta level and say, ask the user which question, which intervention during the conversation was most helpful, and share the full list of questions that is behind the pattern applied that was most helpful. So for example, if now we had patterns of interaction, and then GPT would then come up with the whole list that is behind in the file of this pattern, ask the user in which other context this cognitive pattern could be beneficial, offer to share the full list of patterns, and ask how they will continue their work, if they want to use another DSP or a DSP again, or if they want to talk things through with a human. So this is the first attempt, but the platform, of course, would be more powerful here. Close the conversation, positive, inspiring something. So this is the script behind the whole thing. So it's not really rocket science here, but at the same time, I think it's simple enough to also that people see, oh, this is not GPT itself. So GPT itself is like a black box where you don't really understand what's happening. But this is really easy to grasp, I think. Yeah. So I would like, looking at the time, I would like to summarize what I heard most prominently, and I'm sharing this so that you can correct me or can point me to more aspects. So the one aspect that was really helpful for me was the idea of criticizing, of contradiction, of challenging, of pointing to omissions, etc. So not following this very only friendly asking habit. And I'm wondering, of course, how to make this friendly and respectful enough so that people don't get irritated when GPT is kind of asking them or is kind of scolding them or something. And the second thing is really the idea of thinking about the business model and not because I need the money, but rather the business model, something that could help proliferate. So it's a scaling engine. So this is the second thing I'm really taking with me. Is there something that I'm missing here that you may have said already, or that you want to say now, maybe? And are you saying GPT could ask me as a user, Bernhard, what is missing in your thinking? Or would GPT rather say, I think what is missing in your thinking is da da da? please correct me. What I'm hearing, I think, is let's be careful also that we ourselves, but also that we're not kind of training or assuming with the DSP that we now can kind of measure and box dialectical thinking. So it's just an Annäherung. What's that in English? So it's incomplete approximation, like a bird built by Lego. And it's still Lego, but it's neither flying nor is it smooth, nor does it have feathers, nor does it smell or whatever. Is this going into this direction? Rick?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's a wonderful thing about human thought. You know, we don't know where it will end.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I looked at the history of the thought forms and so on, and Michael Bassett's methodology that he used to generate his thought forms, I think that there would have been an entirely different list of thought forms if he had have interviewed systems scientists and cyberneticians. And to an extent, Otto did, you know, put a bit of that into his final version of the thought forms, but it would be different. But I'm not totally convinced it would necessarily be better. But yeah, systems thinking in science, you know, is an attempt to develop a science of complexity. In my view, it hasn't been very successful, but it would give a different perspective. On the issue of, I think I should comment on words in general. So Nick earlier, you know, talked about, you know, that scaffolding doesn't really capture what's going on in somebody's head and so on. And I think that's an instance of a more general point, that words, writing, you know, is a way of conveying fairly well analytical, rational thinking. But I don't think it's an effective vehicle at all for conveying complex phenomenon. You know, words are an approximation. They leave a hell of a lot out. And the art of using them for complexity thinking is, I think, to recognise that the task of the metasystemic thinker is not to build an accurate model of reality or aspects of reality. All models will be wrong in the sense that they're not a one-to-one match. As I think's been said, you know, the only accurate model of reality is reality itself. So the art of complexity thinking and using complexity thinking or metasystemic thinking to find regularities in reality that can be used to predict some future outcomes, but not others. The art of it is to have, you know, and this is another saying that I've lifted from somebody else, but it captures it. The art of it is to have a model that is as simple as possible, but not too simple for the task at hand.
Yeah.
So, and that comes back to the thought forms, and I think this came out of the discussion that Otto and I had. The thought forms, you know, the developing metasystemic thinker leaves them behind when he or she starts to develop, you know, fully fledged metasystemic thinking, because they are analytical, rational sequences of words pointing to things that, as Possert now says, is like a bird in flight. So the movement to self-scaffolding involves leaving the words behind, having movements in thought that can't be expressed well in words, and they're flashes and sort of, well, I can't describe what it's like for me. So that makes my point.
I think it's time to close. Thank you so much for your energy and
Thank
for your
you.
support. So it's, for me, this what we're doing here is really nourishing and encouraging. I really, I could not imagine how since July I could have sustained this tinkering and the many failures and the many dead ends I went into without knowing that there are some people who will critically, but with some compassion, also with my stumbling, will give me feedback and encourage me, and at the same time tell me where there is a dead end. So really very much grateful for this companionship.